In your baby feeding days, have you ever felt as if your worth was determined by how many ounces you produced or by how you fed your babies? Did it feel like you were just a milk making machine and that every single feeding or pumping session determined your worth for that moment? When healthcare professionals dealt with you, did it feel like you were just the carrier for the infant and that all that mattered was that the infant was well taken care of and that your health was secondary? And I'm talking even about lactation professionals. I have been thinking a lot about episode 105 that just came out with Maggie and her experience with all sorts of professionals in those early days in the hospital, and then even when she came home and sought out private practice help. And no one caught the early signs of spiraling, of her obsessive thoughts about milk supply, of feeling like she couldn't even give her baby an ounce of formula because that meant she was failing. And I think it's time for us to discuss this, both as people who want to feed our babies human milk and as the professionals who try to support those people. So let's get into it.
When I began breastfeeding, I was blindsided by how difficult it was. I may have thought I was prepared, but having only known a handful of people who had ever done it and only seeing it up close a couple of times, I had a huge learning curve. Since then, I've become a doula, a childbirth educator, and an internationally board-certified lactation consultant, or an IBCLC. I'm your host, Lo Nigrosh, and I welcome you to the Milk Making Minutes, where we explore breastfeeding struggles and triumphs through the lens of systemic and cultural barriers, so that you know your baby feeding struggles were not your fault, and your triumphs really are the miracles you feel they are.
The point of the Milk Making Minutes is to explore breastfeeding struggles and triumphs through the lens of medical, systemic, and cultural barriers. And they are countless. There are so many, and we all face them. And so we get forced into this feeling of, am I enough? Can I do this? Can I care for this child in this most basic of ways? Can I feed this baby? And many of us have this deep urge to feed the baby with our body. Not all. And if you don't have that urge, or you never had that urge, and you always had this feeling of however I feed my baby is fine with me, then that's okay too. But many of us do have this urge of wanting to feed human milk to our human babies. And the professionals that come into these support roles, like lactation professionals, peer counselors, doulas, we tend to really understand that passion for human milk making. And so then when we see that somebody is really wanting to feed human milk to their baby and is really struggling to do, sometimes we can all get a little tunnel vision. And we all start to think about, how can I help this person produce more milk for their baby? How can I help this person latch their baby? How can I reduce the pain while latching? How can I help this baby to feed more? And then the obsession sets in, not just for the feeding parent, but for everyone that surrounds the feeding parent. And it is true that sometimes they get pressure in the opposite way. Like, why is this important for you? Why can't you just feed formula? This happens too. But I want to talk about these cases in which somebody is dead set on feeding a baby human milk, and everyone around them is trying to help them do that. And they've hired the right people, and those people are trying to help, and it's all well-meaning. We've all been there. But perhaps this feeling of wanting to feed the baby has turned into a little bit of a mental health crisis, and nobody is seeing it. What can we do in these situations? I think, first of all, the person who is trying to feed the baby human milk in that moment does not know what is normal and what isn't normal when it comes to how much they are obsessing over breastfeeding or chest feeding their baby. So we have to remember that. The person who is trying to feed their baby from their own body and might be obsessing over the amount of milk that they are producing can't tell when they have crossed the line from ordinary postpartum worry to extraordinary postpartum worry. And those of us who are IBCLCs, certified lactation counselors, breastfeeding counselors, whatever your credentials are, even peer supporters, it is beyond our scope of practice to diagnose perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. But it is within our scope of practice to take a step back and to listen and to notice that a person is really not doing well. It is within our scope of practice to ask, what is your day looking like? And if that person is telling you that they are triple feeding, and that triple feeding is leading to no sleep at all, then that should lead to a discussion about how a person needs to sleep in order to be able to take care of their baby. And that, in fact, lack of sleep and stress hormones are going to, over time, reduce milk supply. And that a temporary reduction of stimulation of the breasts in order to increase sleep is going to be better for milk supply over time. That is within our scope to recommend whole person health over tactics that only focus on increasing milk supply. It is within our scope to say, how often do you find yourself crying or worrying throughout the day? And if that is the vast majority of the day, it is within our scope to say, hey, I think we should take a step back and think about other ways you might be able to feed your baby while you focus on your health. And to say that does not mean that you have to stop feeding your baby your own milk all day long, or that you have to provide some amount of formula forever, but that right now your own health is dictating that we need to create another plan temporarily, and that perhaps maybe I should refer you to someone who can help you get your feelings of sadness and worry under control so that you can be the best equipped to care for your baby or children that you can be. That is within our scope. If you are a parent in this situation and you have struggled with mood disorders in the past, I encourage you to let your providers know that. Or if you are worried about mood disorders, let them know, hey, if I start to obsess over this, please look out for that and gently help me to bring my health into the picture. And if you are a support person who is passionate about human milk feeding, I implore you to remember that if a person is losing themselves to human milk feeding, that's not going to be good for mom or baby in the long run. And it's okay for us to help that person create a temporary plan B and then to reevaluate down the line once the person is feeling better. And sometimes it takes that person hearing from the lactation expert and getting that permission from the lactation expert to say, it's okay to do something else. I often tell my clients, I love human milk. I love breast milk and the ways that it benefits our babies. But what I love more than that is a healthy parent. If I'm speaking to a mom, what I love more than that is a healthy mom. And that's why I do this work. So it's really important that you're healthy so you can care for your baby. And this triple feeding plan right now, I don't think it's helping you to be the healthiest that you can be for your baby. So let's drop these triple feeds through the night so that you can get a little more sleep. And let's come up with a plan that's sustainable for your long-term health. I implore lactation professionals and supporters to look at the whole picture and to step back and to ask the questions that are going to help you see what that person's life is like when you are not there. Because if you just sweep in and try to help with the latch and they're able to latch while you're there, but then you leave and they can't, that obsession is going to continue. If you prescribe a triple feeding plan to increase milk supply, but it means they're not sleeping, that is not going to increase their milk supply in the end. And one tool that we can use, even though we are not mental health professionals, is the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale. And this is something that you can print off and you can keep in your toolkit. And it just asks questions like, in the past few days, have you been able to laugh and see the funny side of things at all? Have I looked forward with enjoyment to things? Have I blamed myself unnecessarily when things went wrong? I have been anxious or worried for no good reason. I have felt scared or panicky for no good reason. Things have been getting on top of me. I have been so unhappy that I have had difficulty sleeping. I have felt sad or miserable. I have been so unhappy that I have been crying, and then the thought of harming myself has occurred to me. The maximum score is a 30. And if they're scoring 10 or greater, then there is some possible postpartum depression there, at least. And that's when we really should be referring them to a perinatal mental health professional. We can always have them call Postpartum Support International or text. And sometimes we can say, hey, it really feels like you're struggling in your postpartum period. It is not within my scope, of course, to diagnose you, but breastfeeding is really difficult for you and it seems like you're really anxious. Would you like to call or text Postpartum Support International right now, or would you like me to refer you to a professional in our area to see if their support might be able to help you feel a little bit better? And that's a great way to help them get the support that they need. Let's not leave our clients hanging just because it's outside of our scope. to diagnose them. Sometimes we are the first person that they see, and sometimes the obsession happens around the milk when it's really not about the milk. I hope that you can take this to heart and you can start viewing yourself as somebody who's helping support the full health of your clients. And with that being said, if you are someone who is struggling to feed your baby and you would like the support of a compassionate IBCLC, I would love to be that person who supports you. So much can be done virtually with lactation support. So please reach out to me. You can find my services at www.quavinbirthservices.com. If you are a person who has struggled with perinatal mood and anxiety disorders and want to continue this discussion, please join my Milk Making Minutes community group on Facebook. That's where we have discussions about how things like PMADs impact human milk feeding. I'll see you there.